just last week. So first of all, I'm going to give you a little bit of background on the Vision 2025 project. Maybe some of you are already familiar. But can we have the next slide, please? But for those of you that aren't, we are a long-established industry forum and group, and we exist to help the outdoor events industry take action on the climate crisis. I think next time we revisit that that mission statement, we will include nature as well. So yeah, founded in 2010, and the backdrop of the group really was that it was COP21 in Paris. It was also we'd published the sorry, I was just getting distracted by the emissions. Yeah, so we came together as a group of festivals and interested parties such as BBC, Julie's Bicycle, and some production companies, and we first started talking about power. Actually, you know, how do we transition towards more sustainable power sources in industry? That conversation got some traction, and then we gathered more momentum, more partners, and became an organization which looked at sustainability in the round rather than just sustainable energy. So it started life as Powerful Thinking, which still exists as a sister project, and now it is the Vision 2025. Of course, we're quite close to Vision to the year 2025 now, so we've got our thinking caps on in the background in terms of what next. But over these almost 15 years now, we've been meeting as a group of stakeholders to try and hold that conversation. Where are we as an industry and where are we going? As a steering group, we're hosted by Julie's Bicycle all these years. Without their support, we wouldn't exist. And the steering group is made up of, or the steering group industry forum is made up of industry bodies such as the AAF, AFO Without Walls, Production Services Association, NCAS, NOAA, and also some key partners such as Festival Republic, the Event Industry Forum, and Live Green, which we're a part of, and there's some other partners and supporters there. Next slide, please. So again, for those of you that are new, just a very quick rundown of what we actually do. So we are the industry forum, so we're the official kind of the official industry forum, industry steering group for the outdoor events industry on environmental sustainability. We have a website. One of our key resources is the Show Must Go On report, the first of which we published in 2015. And that really, for the outdoor events industry, was the first time that we've done some research to establish what benchmarks might look like, what current practice looks like, and where are we going. Hence the Vision 2025 pledge, which is really for events rather than companies. But it's a pledge that events have signed up for. I think about 150 plus have signed up over these years. It just provides a bit of a framework and some targets to work towards so that events can find their way on this often complex journey. There is also on the website a resources hub. So what we've done is we've collected everything that we've ever found that's worth reading on event sustainability, put it in one place where you can search for it. So if you haven't had a look, please do. It's really useful. There's an emerging green suppliers database. We sometimes run campaigns. So we're very much consultation-led. So those of you that are festivals in the room will know that each year for many years we've done an event industry survey, which is when we reach out to festivals and say, hey, what's going on? And that's our kind of temperature check each year. But it gives us a view of what the challenges and opportunities are, which we respond to with initiatives. So an example of this might be that there have been various years where a specific issue like what is renewable fuel, you know, people misunderstanding or needing more knowledge about HVO fuel and its supply chains, or the perennial question of, you know, biodegradable versus compostable packaging. So when these issues come up, we respond to them by doing some research, publishing an industry briefing. We also have an industry newsletter. Many of you may already receive it. Amazingly, there's 4,200 event professionals on it, and the open rate is often more than 50%, which is, you know, unheard of. So really amazing engagement. So if you have news for us on any aspects of sustainability, then please stay in touch. We also run a conference each year, the Sustainable Events Summit, which is our opportunity to bring together the year's learning and hold conversations at industry level. And I think that's all I'll say for now, because we want to concentrate on the waste toolkit. And I'll hand over to my co-pilot for this webinar and this project, Richard.
Thanks, Chris, and hi everyone. I'm Richard Phillips, and I'm a climate change specialist for the music sector at Julie's Bicycle. If you don't know, Julie's Bicycle is a leading charity mobilising arts and culture to take action on the climate, nature and justice crisis. We work right across the creative community, so we work with theatre, dance, cinema, music, visual arts, and everything in between. And our belief really is that the climate crisis is a cultural crisis, and so the cultural sector has a really important part to play in overcoming it. And most recently, we've been leading efforts to place culture at the heart of the COP climate negotiations going forward with a great deal of success as well. In music, we work across live and recorded sides of the sector, and a lot of our work in festivals is in partnership with Vision 2025 that Chris just ran through. And this project is a good example of that collaboration. So this project has been hand in hand between Vision 2025 and Julie's Bicycle. It's been funded by a really amazing grant maker called the Dixon Foundation. Without those funds provided by the Dixon Foundation, this project wouldn't exist. And we've also had additional support from Earth% as well, which has enabled us to do things like launch the toolkits at AIF Congress last week and to run the webinar and everything in between as well. So the Towards Zero Waste Festivals project, this is what we're here to talk about. So this project is all about waste management at festivals, which I know is maybe not the most glamorous of topics, but it is an important one. The Vision Industry Green Survey that gets put out to the sector every year consistently finds that waste is a #1 issue, or certainly up there among the top issues for festival organisers. And the reasons for that are probably quite obvious. It's a very visible problem. It's a problem that very often gets picked up by the media after festivals as well. So it's really kind of at the forefront of the minds when we're thinking about sustainability at festivals. But at the same time, that survey shows that it's an area which is a very sticky problem. It's very challenging to make serious improvements regarding your waste management systems. So it's an area that we had identified, Chris and I, and it's an area that we want to help the industry on. And this collaborative project between Vision and Julie's Bicycle has sought to provide some solutions to those challenges that festival organisers are experiencing regarding waste management. We've been guided by a wider task force, so this involves a wider collaboration. I won't name everyone on here, but we have a collection of festivals, waste contractors, waste specialists and sustainability experts, and government representatives as well, and city and local authority representation. And all of that expertise has really helped to make this project as valuable to the sector as possible, and we're very grateful to everyone for their input to the project to date. So in summary, this Towards Zero Waste Festivals project has 2 phases. Phase 1 was really about understanding the challenges around waste management for festivals. So it's about kind of just putting in black and white, really, in a report, our understanding of what the challenges are in terms of making progress on waste management. That process involved an industry survey with festivals. It involved supplier interviews with waste contractors, and we also commissioned some research from waste specialist Resource Futures to uncover some further detail there. And the outputs of that phase, which were last year, is a findings report, as you can see on the left hand of the screen, and a waste legislation report. So they kind of do what they say on the tin, really. The findings report highlights the challenges that were uncovered through that process, and I'll share those on the next slide. And the waste legislation report is just setting out a 101 for the industry, really, on what the festival sector needs to do to be compliant with legislation and what legislation is likely down the line. So just kind of setting that baseline understanding. The main challenges that were identified in the report, so I'll just give a summary of these just so we're kind of on the same page, because these directly informed the toolkit that we're about to show to you. So some of these challenges may be very familiar to you. The first that's identified in the report is confusion over the sustainability of material types and what material types mean in general. So Chris has already mentioned a couple of those which are frequently cited as being quite confusing to the sector. Things like whether a material is compostable, biodegradable, organic. The key questions there are sort of what does that actually mean? And then second to that, what is the best choice environmentally? There's a lot of confusion in the industry on what is the best choice for the material type for different types of items that are on site. The next challenge identified was around data. So obviously good data is needed to make improvements, to inform improvements across the whole festival strategy, particularly for waste as well. But we're finding that that good quality data is often lacking. It's often coming late, way after the event, way after the strategy for next year's festival has already been put in place. And also the data that you receive from waste suppliers is very often imprecise. So you might get average recycling rates for the sector, but not specific recycling rates for your own festival. And that information doesn't help really when you're trying to look at particular areas in which you can improve at your own festival. So the data is coming late and it's not very accurate. Another challenge is around engaging audiences, traders and staff, so engaging key stakeholders. What we find is that people really want to help and they want to be part of a strong waste management strategy, but they just simply don't know how. And often the communications are inconsistent or confusing. And that relates really to the last 2 points there about inconsistencies in approaches to waste management across the festival sector, which, if nothing else, is causing also confusion for waste suppliers as well in how to deal with each festival. And there's also inconsistencies around signage and communications. So different icons are used, even different colors are used for different types of bins. It literally comes down to something as simple and as kind of everyday and mundane as that. The different colors, the different signs, the different wording that's being used around bins is creating confusion among audience members, particularly when they're going to lots of different festivals across the festival season. So there needs to be this level of consistency. You can probably see the two words that maybe stand out most across those bullets are confusion and inconsistencies. And this is what the project is trying to resolve. And really what that means, the result of all of this, these are just kind of the challenges, but what that tangibly means for the sector is that there's high overall waste totals. So we're throwing away a lot of waste and there's low reuse and recycling rates. So those twin issues really highlight, I think, the challenge that we're trying to overcome through the Towards Zero Waste Festivals project. So that was phase one, and that was last year. Phase two has all been about putting that into something which is actually actionable. Instead of just putting out a report of the findings of challenges, what can we actually do about it? And what we've done is create a toolkit called the Sustainable Materials and Waste Management Toolkit, which is directly informed by the findings from phase one. So what is it? Very simply, it is a toolkit of guidance and resources needed to improve waste management at greenfield festivals. Who is it for? It's for busy festival professionals responsible for waste management. So the waste lead, for example. However, this is written in a way that would be relevant to kind of anyone really working at on a festival site or anyone working on the strategy of an overall festival. And what resources are included within the toolkit? We have tips, we have checklists, we have templates and external links. And these are all based around 10 steps. I'm going to dig into that across the next couple of slides. But just to set out the principles of the toolkit, and just to say early on before we dive into it, and I share the screen of the different resources that are available, it's really important to say that we've tried to do something different with this. What this is not a lengthy, dusty report, which is going to gather virtual dust and be read once by only those who are kind of most passionate about waste and then put on the shelf. What we've tried to do here is we've designed this to be as practical as possible for implementation. So the toolkit is really action focused. It's less, I would say, about understanding the issues and building knowledge. And it's actually more about skipping that step and putting the things that you need right there in your hand to be able to create change in the moment and directing you to the right resources to use at the right times. It's also designed to be easy to use. So we've made a real concerted effort to use as simple language as possible throughout. Sustainability as a whole can get very jargonistic very quickly, and that is also the case for the waste sector. So we've tried to create it so it's very simple in language, and it also clearly signposts to the different resources that you need at the right times. And finally, we've designed it with the principle of it being chronological in delivering the waste strategy. So it's all ordered around a number of steps, meaning that this document is something that you can have in your hands throughout the festival delivery period, right from the start to the very end and the post-event wrap-up. So this toolkit is something that you can have throughout that journey in delivering, in creating and delivering the waste strategy at your festival. So how to actually use this toolkit? As I mentioned, it's not a lengthy report. It is based around 10 steps. Each of those steps provides guidance on the actions that you can take to complete each step. And it also provides the right resources that you will need to help you complete those actions. So this simple table here is just almost an overview, really, of how the toolkit is structured. So it almost does work as a table. So on the left-hand side, you have the number of steps that you need to take chronologically to build and deliver your waste management strategy. And then the middle column provides a number of actions that you can take against those steps. So that might be things that you practically need to do. It might be people that you need to talk to. It might be documents that you need to share, but there are a number of actions there for each step. And then the final column gives you the resources, which are checklists, templates, tips, and links, which will help you to complete those actions and therefore complete the step. So that's how it's all been structured. And these are the steps. So just to remind you, these are 10 steps to create and deliver your waste management strategy. And I think it's some feat that we've been able to get it all on one slide, because that is incredible that you have the full waste management strategy, everything that you need to do, and all the links on one slide, on one piece of paper, essentially. So I appreciate this is a little bit small. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to hop over to the steps, and hopefully that has been seamless and you can now just see the steps. So this is the main document that you would download. As I say, you can see the steps on the left, the number of the steps, and the overall title of what stage you're on. And then you have the actions down the middle, and then the resources, which are all linked out along the side. And it's also broken down into what you need to do pre-event, what you need to do during the event, and what you need to do post-event. And it's all on one piece of paper. Look at that. So just very briefly, step one is about planning. So first of all, you need to appoint someone to be responsible for the waste management strategy. You need to appoint someone who has the time and the ability to lead the strategy. And there are some resources here of how you can upskill them. And there's even things like a glossary of terms for anything which might be complicated in terms of the sustainability jargon. The next step is about creating a materials list and a materials policy. And in a moment, I'll share with you what these two resources look like. But here is where the strategy really starts to take shape. And this is the essential building blocks, really, of then developing a waste management strategy. The next step is about having internal conversations. Chris, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was just thinking that some of the background here might be useful. So on that first step, our assumption is that some people are starting from scratch, and that some people are already very experienced. So we've pitched it, as Richard already mentioned, to beginners. But we also think that there's probably stuff in here that will be useful for even really experienced waste management site managers, procurement managers, whichever role happen. And I realise that each organisation is structured slightly differently. But one of the key things, as Richard mentioned before, about the waste task force is this is the first time that we've really engaged the waste suppliers. And that's felt really important. So for years, we've been hearing from festival organisers, well, it would be fantastic if we could just have a template policy or like actual templates or contract management terms, like not just some advice, but actually the document that we can start with. And there's lots of that in here. But it felt important to say that those have been developed sort of with the site contractors, with the waste management contractors. So we had 3 or 4 of them in our working group. And one example is the site planning tips. I don't think we'll look at it now, but it just felt important to mention that, or maybe should we have a quick look, Richard? So this is an example of some tips. So I kind of want to say that some of what is in these, for those of you that are more experienced, may seem obvious, but it's also our experience that even the obvious things that support good process, whether it's more or less sustainable, but just good process and achieving more sustainable outcomes. In my experience and the project's experience, it's quite often that very professional organizations miss the basics. So it just feels like it's sort of useful to stress that, and also useful to stress that there really is a strong voice from contractors, because we've come at this project from the point of view that it takes all of us. You know, it's often the voice of the festival organizer that gets heard in terms of, well, we're not receiving accurate data from a waste contractor, which is very much my experience as well. And I know that to be true, but it's also the case that some of the things that contractors need to have in place on site might not be fully considered. And so they're in a position where they can't achieve higher recycling rates because there hasn't been enough budget for infrastructure, or they haven't got the right access on site. So this site planning tips, as an example, has got loads of information that's been shared to us from the contractors to say, hey, if we're going to work together to achieve much better recycling rates, then these are the things that we need in place. So yeah, I think that's it for that one.
We've jumped ahead slightly, but that's one example of the tips. And I'm not going to go through each of the steps, but you have them there to look through. And as I say, these are the full 10 steps that you need to deliver the waste management strategy with the actions that you needed and the resources. So what I'm going to do now is share what each of those types of resources looks like, because as I said, we have links, we have tips, checklists, and templates. So one example of a checklist is the materials checklist. And as you can see along the top, and each of the documents are structured this way, you can see which step you're on. So step 1 was to start planning. This is currently step 2 is to create a materials list and to create a materials policy. So you can see what step you're on within each resource as well. So this step is about understanding what materials are on site. And each document also has just this little box at the top which says the purpose of the document, so you understand what you're working with, who it is designed for. In most instances, it will be designed for the waste lead, the person responsible for waste at your festival, and then how you should use it. So for the materials checklist, what this is aiming to do is to list out the most common materials at festival sites, and it highlights which of them are problematic for waste management, so to give you an idea of which should be avoided. So essentially, it's giving you a head start really in understanding what's on site. So it's instead of you needing to reinvent the wheel and do the hard graft of understanding all the materials that might be coming onto site with a blank piece of paper, it gives you a big head start in listing out all the most common ones. Of course, this is editable, so it is designed to be used as a checklist, and you can go through each of the materials and engage with your stakeholders to understand whether they are on site at any of the areas. And this is how it's broken down into the different areas: arena, traders, bars, offices, etc. And you can tick where the material is likely to be coming onto sites. You can also edit this by adding in any of the materials that you come across or that you know of or that your stakeholders make you aware of. And it's just to give an understanding of what is coming onto site. There's also a column here about the best option for waste management. So it tells you, based on each material type along the left, how you should be dealing with it in the most environmentally sustainable way. And as I mentioned, we have another column, which is avoid if possible. So this is highlighting certain material types that we know to be problematic and hazardous in waste management. These are things which are either negative for their environmental impact, or because they are highly likely to contaminate recycling. So we have things here like plastic film wrappers, so single-use plastics basically, and other plastic types. And then we've even broken down different types of material for single-use cups and which single-use cup material types you should be avoiding. So it really goes into a great level of granular detail to help you make the best material choices at the first instance, because that's the best way to reducing overall waste totals and increasing reuse and recycling, is to make sure you're bringing the right materials onto site in the first place. Chris, I don't know if there's anything that you want to add to this one.
I mean, this is the resource which I mean, the obviously the whole toolkit and the sequence and the steps in terms of guidance and all the resources is the real benefit here. But I think of all the resources, this is the one that feels most potent. Again, reflecting on the feedback we've had from festival organisers, people don't know where to start. They haven't got these kind of templates. They don't necessarily feel confident about which materials they should be focusing on or avoiding. And in a way, this kills many birds with one stone. So it's a way to collect the information. So, you know, either one person uses this sheet and has the conversations, or this sheet can be sent, you know, to your various stakeholders to fill it out for you, and then you would pull it all together. So, as Richard said, it's a way to establish what materials are going to be on site, which many festivals are not doing because it feels too complicated. But then once you have this, and at the risk of stating the obvious, this is a way to communicate clearly with your waste contractor and have those advanced conversations, which are often missing in the process, to say, okay, we've actually got ourselves together and we've got a really accurate picture of what's on site. How can we do this? It also facilitates very early conversations internally in terms of, you know, we've given the tips in terms of materials to avoid if possible on here, just as a nudge. But we're hoping that this, if done early enough in the process, means that an internal team can come together and go, okay, what can we achieve this year? You know, what are the materials that we can design out? How do we do that? And how do we communicate that early in the process? The next step, and I think probably this is where Richard is going with the next document, is that this then neatly informs the materials policy, which again is something which a lot of festivals seem not to have. So once you've had those internal and external discussions about the possibility of encouraging certain materials or banning or discouraging other materials, then you've got your content to shape a materials policy, and we have a materials policy template waiting. I'll hand back to you, Richard.
Thanks, Chris. So yes, this is the second document that forms part of this step 2. So once you've created that materials list template, or not even created it, once you've filled it out based on the template, you then have this materials policy template, which the material list informs. So, I mean, again, we have the purpose of this document, who it's designed for, and how to use it. As a summary, this is essentially a draft template. It's a draft policy. So anything that's listed as a template is designed to be a foundational document that you can have to get the ball rolling. And it features the most important aspects that you need to be including in documents such as this. But the idea is that you can edit it to make it reflect the specifics of your own festival. It just gives you a head start in developing it, and also signposting you to the kinds of things that you need to be including. So the purpose of this document is to provide that foundation to create your own materials policy. Who it's for, again, it's for the waste lead to complete, but once it is complete, it's designed to be shared with all your key stakeholders, all your key teams and companies that you're working with internally and externally. Then how to use it, as I say, this should be adapted. So this is just to give you a head start, and then after that, it should be adapted to create your own specific version. So each of these templates will have this box just kind of outlining what the document's for at the start, and then you need to scroll down to get to the start of the actual document. So here is the template. So you'll see immediately we have these kind of chevrons really for where you can input your own information. So it might be that you add your festival logo here, you add your festival name, and this is your materials policy. And we've got basically some stock text, which is not filler. It's designed to be best in practice notation really on how to manage your waste. So it kind of sets that out for you, and it's based around the waste hierarchy. And I think for the purposes of this webinar, I won't go into the details of the waste hierarchy and everything that's on here. You can engage with that in your own time, but it sets it out in the best way possible really for how you should manage your waste strategy most sustainably. There's a key section here on your key policies, key campaigns, and the kinds of things that you want to be doing this year. It gives you a few examples, but it's there for you to add your own policies. Prohibited materials. So this comes back to what Chris was saying, that this links directly to the materials list, the materials checklist that I just went through. If there are any materials that you're seeing on site which have been flagged in this document as a potential material that you need to avoid, then you can add that as part of your prohibited materials in your materials policy. There might be materials that you want to avoid or reduce. So you have materials you want to prohibit and materials that you ideally want to reduce. And then you have all the different types of materials that are coming onto site and how you're going to make an action against them to improve the sustainability of the materials and improve the sustainability of your waste management strategy. And you can go through each material there. We've already got some examples in here, but you will just need to tailor that for what's specific to your event. And voila, you have your own materials policy that you're able to share with key stakeholders. As simple as that, really. Chris, is there anything you want to add?
No, I guess, I mean, for those of you that are event managers on the call, you might be thinking, well, how does that relate to the waste management plan? But in our experience, this is a sort of really good first step because, as I guess you all know, who produces the waste management plan differs in different organisations, but also between the festival itself and the waste contractor. And actually what we've found is that it's more commonly the case that the waste management plan is effectively the kind of proposal document or plan which the contractor provides to the festival in detail. And so this feels like a really important step on the side of the festival organisers to take control of kind of what their aims, targets, and policy should be, that then informs principally the contract and the expectations set out with the contractor, but also with all the other stakeholders, as Richard mentioned already. That's me.
Great. So just returning to the 10 steps, you can see that we've just gone through step 2, essentially. The actions of that was to use the materials list template to understand what materials are on site and to use the materials policy template. So they're the actions that you need to complete for this step. And once you've done both of those and you've gone through those resources, you've done step 2, you've created your materials list and your policy, and you can start to have internal conversations. So peppered throughout these steps are multiple times really or stages where you will need to have those conversations with key stakeholders and key decision makers. These can be the waste supplier, they can be anyone who's coming onto sites, traders, bar staff, even security, as well as your audience as well. So there's this kind of internal and external communications opportunities. And what we've done to try and guide you in having those conversations, I mean, first of all, you'll have the documents ready by completing the templates, but we've also got these tips documents, which will just give you some pointers really on how best to have those conversations, how to set them up, and how to have a conversation which kind of leads to action and making it most meaningful. There are lots of different tips documents. There are the site planning tips, as we've mentioned, tips for internal conversations, tips even for contracts with waste management companies. So something that we found out through the phase 1 of this project is that simply festivals don't know what to ask waste management companies, or they don't know what waste management companies are capable of kind of responding with. And also on the flip side of that, waste management companies, there's a disconnect between what they expect to see from festivals. So what we've done is create some tips for the T's and C's of your contracts with waste management companies, which go beyond just the mere commercials, but actually incorporate what you need to be asking waste management companies around data and around the provision of services, basically, to make the waste management as sustainable as possible. We also have tips for bins and signage, and then tips for external communications. I'm just going to show you the tips for external communications document, just so you know what that's like. So this is on step 6, to communicate the waste management plan once you've created one in the previous steps. And as opposed to the checklist documents and the template documents, the tips documents are locked down as PDFs because this is purely just for your own information and your own learning. There's no need to edit or tailor any of these. It's just to kind of help guide you. So again, the purpose of this document is just to provide awareness and to inform your conversations. It's for the waste lead to use. And the way in which you engage with it is just you read and absorb the document and read and absorb the information and put it into action, essentially. So this document, I won't go through all the ins and outs. I want to leave time for questions, but we just have the types of people that you might want to engage. So production teams, contractors, bars, food traders, market traders, etc. What you need to communicate in terms of tangible documents. So it might be the materials policy, it might be waste reduction targets, it might be campaigns around bring a reusable bottle, campaigns for festival goers around take your tent home, etc. And then we have some tips throughout for each of those. Keep it actionable, communicate your targets, use images and icons, etc., etc. I'm not going to go into all the ins and outs of this, but that just gives you a flavor of what the tips documents look like. And there's some examples here as well to act as some inspiration for you to follow, and some example social media posts as well. So that is the tips document. I think the only thing that's left to say really is that we have made this so you can download it in different ways. So you can download there's an online version of the 10 steps, which is on the Vision website, or you can go to the Julie's Bicycle website and download the PDF, and that will just give you the 10 steps that you need with the actions associated, and then the individual links for the resources. That is basically designed for people who maybe don't want to go through the whole document, but just want to pick out a couple of the resources for a particular step that you're struggling with. So as Chris mentioned earlier on, for people who are maybe a bit more advanced, but they're having problems with one particular issue, you can look for that and just download that one resource. Or alternatively, and this is what I would be doing, is downloading the whole package of the toolkit as one zip file, which is a zipped folder which has all of the documents in it already broken down into a file system based around the 10 steps. So you'll download the zip folder, and within it you'll have a number of folders related to each step, and you'll already have each resource in the relevant folder for you to go in there and edit and develop as you see fit. So there are two ways of downloading it, and you're probably already getting the point by now that we're trying to do something quite different with this, to make something which is really actionable and broken down into a number of steps so that you don't need to control F on a massive report. So hopefully this is something that's going to be much closer to your hands, really, in the full delivery of the waste management strategy. And it's something that you can turn to as and when you need it, right throughout the process, really, rather than it being lost in amongst all the other very lengthy reports that are out there. So I think that more or less covers everything from me. Chris, I don't know if you have any closing remarks before we head to questions.
I guess just the sentiment that, and it's where you started, Richard, that we've really made an effort to make this as simple as possible, but perhaps it wasn't a surprise to us. But in doing so, we had such an amazing group of people working on this. So a core team of people who have, decades of experience in waste management on festival sites, in behaviour change. And actually the challenge was making this simple because it's a complex topic. But I think my feeling is that we've, especially with things like the materials list template, which was a huge task. My feeling is that it's landed as something quite simple, but I want to stress that it's also work in progress, because organisations are so different. Each festival situation is so different. So what we'd like to encourage is this sense that this is a collaborative piece of work. It's already been profoundly collaborative in the way that it has been designed. But any of you that use it over the next months, years, then please give us feedback. We want to come back to it, improve it, learn from your experience, and just make sure that this is a really useful resource for everyone. That's me.
Great. And with that, I think we'll turn to questions. So feel free to either put those in the chat or to come off mute and ask them directly. When we launched this at the AIF Congress, we had a big discussion around collaboration and how we take this forward, and some peer-to-peer learning, which was out of the scope of this project whilst it was collaborative. But in terms of kind of how people engage with this toolkit going forwards, I think it'll be really interesting to come back round and see how it's worked for you all, really.
Richard, should we lose the slide and go to perhaps this is a moment where people can pop their screens on, and yeah, questions very welcome. Come on, someone must have a question.
I have not so much it's not really a question, but I love the concept. I love the simplicity of the structure. And what I come into contact with time and time again in my job is the real the challenge that it is to make this one size fits all approach. And so it's not really a question, but I'm really interested to see how it works being rolled out by lots of different festival types, lots of different event types, and just to see what pops up. That's what I meant when it starts to really get used and integrated, and see how it can adapt and change. But I really like it in the way that it's been presented, in that simplicity, and that I think people really do want to just be told what to do. So I think it'll be yeah, it'll be it seems very usable.
Great, and I mean, and as Richard stated, we haven't currently got funding to kind of for the next phase, although we'll be looking for it. But some senior people from Festival Republic have been involved in this design. So what we're really interested in is how does it work for Festival Republic at that large multi-event scale, and how does it work for a volunteer? You know, maybe that's a stretch, but you know, a group of volunteers or enthusiasts running perhaps their first or second year of a festival with 500 to 1,000 people. So we're really keen to kind of have those cases and review it towards the end of the year, and I'm sure we'll find some funding.
I think I would also add that I think the structure of it means that you can take what you want from it. So if you're already quite advanced, or your festival is very large, then you can just use things that you need to pull out from that. Or if you're really starting from scratch, you can use everything. And the fact that the documents are editable with the checklists and templates means that you can really take the template as almost rote and just change a little bit, or you can change a hell of a lot of it. But the idea is just to basically get everyone along a similar thought pattern, which also helps for waste suppliers as well in driving that consistency. So I think the fact that they are editable means that you can make it work for however you want.
Any more thoughts or questions? I mean, your questions can be sharing your challenges, or I mean, I don't know how many of you have managed to actually download the toolkit. Obviously, people haven't had a chance to use it yet. Any thoughts are welcome. Maria?
Yes, hi. I just wanted to ask, from your experience, maybe you had this situation with maybe not the biggest festival in the world, but maybe 1,000 people only. What is the best tip to reduce organic waste if you don't have any compost or any good contractors in the area? Thanks.
Okay, so the question is, so one of the key recommendations from the first piece of research we did in phase 1 of this report was in terms of quick wins. So we identified what are the things, the easy wins that we can do that are really important in terms of environmental benefit in the sector. And one of them, in fact, probably one of the strongest ones, was separating and composting food waste. But is it that is your question that you know that you can't compost food waste, so you want to reduce it?
Yes, correct.
Okay, so I'd be thinking kind of, well, most of the food waste is probably coming from either the cafes that are on site or your crew catering. Do you think that's the case for you guys?
Yes, of course, but maybe there are some tips where we can start our conversation. What kind of food it can be that will reduce organic waste? Maybe portions or something like that.
Yeah. Well, something that works well on a lot of festival sites is to connect your crew catering with your public-facing cafes, because quite often crew catering can work with the leftover food from cafes. So that's often good. I guess, I mean, I don't think we'll ever completely avoid food waste on a festival site because it's very difficult for a cafe to predict how much sales they have. Um, but I guess, you know, finding a use for edible food to be taken and reused, you know, that could be the crew taking it away. It could be crew catering. It could be that you have a local partner or organization that can use that food. Obviously, you have to go through a process to establish that the food is still safe. With dry goods, with tinned goods, that's not a problem. With fresh goods, that's a question mark. So that's, you know, depending on the regulations locally, you'd need to have a look at that. And I guess I also would point you towards the future festival tools. A piece of work we were involved with last year with 7 European partners was creating this wonderful e-learning course and resource. So I don't know how much is on this specific question around food compost, but there's certainly some interesting and useful stuff in a bite-sized e-learning format for food and all the other topics. So I'd also send you there.
Thank you.
I just saw a hand up, but then it's gone down. I think that was you, Lucy.
Yeah, it's me. I was just thinking from the conversation about what you would sort of recommend as being the most. I haven't looked at the toolkit fully yet, but the most like economical thing people can do for a festival. So lots of people that I work for, one of the biggest barriers is the cost of infrastructure and putting these things in place. What would you say was the, you know, top 2 or top 3 things that you'd recommend?
Well, it depends on what you're trying to achieve, of course. I mean, bigger picture circular economy, you know, and looking at the whether you call it the R ladder or the waste hierarchy, our absolute priority is to reduce the materials we use in the first place. And I know it sounds obvious, but if we're able to reduce the materials we use in the first place, and if we're able to make sure that the materials we use are easily reused or recycled, then we kind of design out the problem and the costs of waste management. So I think in terms of the toolkit, why I'm so excited about that materials inventory, the materials list, and the materials policy is I think that is what is going to really enable festivals to take control of that part of the process as long as they do it early enough in the planning. And I think there are costs to be saved.
Do you think though, because I know that Shangri-La, one of the last Glastonbury's, I think they got down to counting every single nail that they used. But time-wise, that's quite a lot of people, quite a lot of man hours.
Yeah. I mean, depending on scale, I realize that well, reusable cups is usually a win-win situation. Now, for very small events, it's still not commercially accessible. But once you get past kind of 5,000, then it's just brilliant for every reason. It works out costs wise. In fact, it's often a cost benefit to festivals, although the initiative shouldn't be designed that way, but it often works out that you at least break even or do better. But you significantly reduce the amount of litter on site. So sometimes you can see a cost saving in litter picking, maybe not in the first year, but based on the experience of the first year. And then the audience feedback is almost always really positive. You know, people really love if people notice that this festival sites are cleaner, there's this really strong sort of tipping point or feedback loop, which happens where people's pride in the environment they're in increases. And also it becomes less acceptable to drop litter, the less litter there is. There's a tipping point in there somewhere. And for different demographics, it's a slightly different point.
But like the broken window theory.
Yeah. And once you've started that process by doing one thing like introducing reusable cups, or putting your bins in much more sensible locations so that people using plates don't drop, you know, that it's easy for them to dispose of them, single-use plates. so they don't end up being litter on the floor. And once you set the ball rolling, you can quite often see significant shifts, and then you might be able to see some saving in staff and waste processing costs. But I do also have to be honest, because I don't think that, sorry, I don't think in many cases recycling well doesn't necessarily save you money because of the infrastructure that you might need to separate materials. And at the moment, the economics of the waste industry is such that we're not significantly rewarded for separating materials because of the sale value. Now, I think that's going to change probably quite quickly. The commodities market will drive the changes in terms of what the value of materials coming out of festival sites will be, and it will be increasingly valuable to separate. But right here, right now, I would say that the easiest and most sort of cost-effective measures that we can take of everything that's in the toolkit is that early planning, reducing materials that are difficult, trying to reduce the overall waste, and then there's less management costs.
Thank you.
So maybe we'll take one more question and finish a few minutes early, because it's I think probably culturally we should ban meetings that end and finish at exactly the same time. One final question. Come on, someone must have a really tricky situation that they need solving.
I have a question, but I've already asked one, so I don't want to hog the questions, only if no one else has a question.
Go for it.
Okay. And sorry, you may have already talked about this, like on the within the documents, but was this piloted, and what was that process of testing out the framework and toolkit and getting that feedback, and how did that process go, and how much did it change? Yes.
In essence, no, it hasn't been piloted in its final form, but what we're hoping is that the process we followed to create it has, at least to a certain extent, ironed out some of the potential problems. So I guess it's being piloted now, and you could be those people. In fact, please be those people. But we were very careful to make sure that we had behaviour change experts, waste contractors, small festivals, huge festivals. So local authority, government, almost every stakeholder that we could think of. So we've been through an iterative process whereby at the very beginning, as a working group, we decided what it is that festivals needed. And that was, as well as Richard shared, that was very much, the toolkit's been based on what festivals have told us that they need in the first place. And then the iterative process has been to create a brief, go away, write content, come back to the working group, have detailed feedback about different elements of the toolkit from the working group, particularly the contractors and the festivals, and then refine it. And now we have the final product. But I think this is going to be the beginning of the journey. Anything to add, Richard?
No, I think you more or less covered it. I think the only point I would add wider to this specific waste toolkit is just whether this way of launching materials works. I'm very interested to see how this lands. I think there is often an information gap where you sort of assume that putting out a big report will lead to action when that hasn't always been the case. So I think someone mentioned it earlier on, as just being told what it is you need to do and being given the resources that you need to adapt. So I'll be very curious to see how this works this festival season, and then whether we could do the same for energy and for other areas, transport as well. Oh, Andrew, one last question. Yes.
Yeah, just one point this morning I've learned. We are now, as a country, importing recycled plastic because there's a shortage of recycling going on. So coming back to Lucy's point, I think we're going to find demand for plastic from festivals as quite quite an opportunity to earn some extra cash. So watch out for that one. It's coming this year.
Right, it's good to know.
Sorry, can I just ask one quick thing? Andrew, where should I watch? Is there somewhere specific? Is there a website or
Yeah, there's a
news channel?
there's a podcast from the States. Let me look it up. But I heard it this morning. It was released late last night. I heard it this morning. So I think the place to look is firstly the podcast, and secondly, keeping an eye on waste plastic prices through the institution that manages that of name escapes me at the moment. But I think we need to just be aware that there are people out there that will pay for waste now. Yeah.
And you perfectly set me up to say, if you're not already signed up to the Vision 2025 newsletter, as soon as it becomes available to the festival market, because we're working directly with waste contractors, and there's some news, then we'll pop it in the newsletter, which comes out monthly. So thank you all for your time today. I hope it's been useful. Please use the toolkit, stay in touch, let us know how it goes, sign up for the newsletter, use the website resources, and good luck.